The first mistake was believing the archive wanted to be found. It waited, patient as a fossil, beneath Titan's methane tides for a species arrogant enough to mistake its silence for surrender. When the rover's drill bit pierced its crystalline shell, the archive sang, a single note, low and resonant, vibrating through ice and bone. The humans called it a miracle. They did not hear the hunger in its harmonics. For eons, the Vorath had seeded such archives across the stars, tombs masquerading as troves. They etched their history into glyphs that burned with borrowed emotion, their language a fever dream of beauty and dread. To decode it was to taste despair. To activate it was to light a pyre. The Earth Colonial Authority celebrated the discovery as destiny. They did not know the Vorath were not refugees, but gardeners, cultivating civilizations only to reap them. The archive's signal bloomed across the dark, a siren song to the swarm, and Earth trembling in its cradle, never sensed the teeth behind the kiss. But in the quiet between transmissions, the archive remembered. It had been designed to admire its prey, to savor the moment a species glimpsed the trap. There was poetry in their hope, their engineers and soldiers scrambling to weaponize its secrets. They would debate morality, fracture into factions, and bury their terror under protocols. None would ask the only question that mattered. What if salvation was the bait? The Vorath did not sleep. They did not flee. They drifted, patient as shadows toward the blue-green world that glimmered like a wound in the void. And the archive watched, humming its dirge, as humanity's clock began its final count. Chapter 1. The methane lakes of Titan stretched endlessly under a sky choked with swirling amber clouds, their surfaces rippling like liquid mercury. Zev trudged through the sludge, his boots sinking into the viscous muck with every step. The weight of his oxygen rig pressed into his shoulders, a familiar burden. He hated this frozen wasteland, hated the way the diamond dust storms sliced through the atmosphere, scattering prismatic shards that glittered like broken promises. But hatred was a useful fuel. It kept his mind sharp, his reflexes quicker than the slow creeping frost on his visor. Scavenging was a solitary trade, and solitude suited him. The corporations paid handsomely for alien relics buried beneath Titan's crust, and Zev had a gift for sniffing out the dead and discarded. His sensors had pinged an anomaly, 3 clicks northeast, a faint energy signature humming beneath the ice. Probably another hunk of derelict machinery, he told himself. But the signal pulsed with a rhythm that felt almost alive. He paused at the edge of a fissure, its jagged maw exhaling plumes of methane. Below, half submerged in black ice, a structure glimmered. Not metal, not stone, crystalline, its facets refracting the dim sunlight into spectral blades. The artifact, a hexagonal vault the size of a lander, thrummed with a low resonant frequency that vibrated in his molars. Alien tech, real alien tech, the kind that could buy a man a new identity, a quiet life far from the guilt gnawing at his ribs. Zev knelt, brushing frost from the vault's surface. Intricate runes spiraled across its frame, glowing faintly blue. His gloved hand hovered. A decade ago he might have hesitated, but the man who'd abandoned his crew on Phobos didn't flinch. He pressed his palm to the glyphs. The vault shrieked. A beam of cobalt light erupted, lancing into the sky. Zev staggered back, his HUD flashing warnings as the ground shuddered. Above, the clouds convulsed, twisting into a vortex that spat lightning. The beam intensified, etching a star map into the atmosphere, a map centered on Earth. His stomach dropped. Broadcast. The vault was transmitting. The dropship descended like a vulture, its thrusters scattering diamond dust in a corrosive hail. Zev crouched behind a glacial ridge, watching through his rifle's scope as a figure in a sleek black envirosuit disembarked. Military cut. Corporate insignia on the shoulder. Earth Colonial Authority. He cursed. They'd traced the signal. The figure removed their helmet, revealing a woman with close-cropped hair the color of ironwood and eyes that mirrored Titan's frost-bitten plains. She studied the vault with a scientist's precision, her gloved fingers tracing the runes. Zev's comm crackled. "You've triggered a Class Omega artifact. Stand down for debrief." Her voice was clipped, authority honed by generations of service. He emerged slowly, rifle slung in mock surrender. Didn't realize grave robbing required a permit. This isn't a grave. She didn't look at him. Her focus on the vault's pulsating core. It's a beacon. And you've just invited the entire galaxy to dinner. Zev smirked. You here to arrest me or lecture me? Both. She finally turned, her gaze sharp enough to flay. Nara Vaith, xenolinguist, ECA, and you're Zev Cordis, former ECA pilot, court-martialed for desertion. The name hit like a slug to the ribs. He'd scrubbed his record, bribed officials, buried the past under layers of ice and false identities. Yet here she stood, peeling him open with a glance. You here to drag me back? No. She activated a holographic interface, the runes mirroring on her display. I'm here to decode this, and you're going to help. The vault's interior was a labyrinth of light. Prismatic corridors spiraled into darkness, their walls alive with shifting glyphs. Nara moved through them like a priestess in a temple, her gloved hands hovering over symbols that flared at her touch. Zev lingered behind, his boots leaving smudges on the immaculate floor. It's a language, she murmured, more to herself than him. But not just information, emotion. The glyphs respond to intent, to hunger. Great, a moody dictionary. He thumbed the fuse of a plasma charge, half tempted to blast the thing to slag. She shot him a withering look. This dictionary's just transmitted coordinates to a network spanning half the Orion arm. Whoever built this, they're not refugees, they're surveyors, marking targets, prey. Her voice tightened. The transmission's a homing signal, and whatever's coming, it's been doing this for millennia. A low hum reverberated through the vault. The walls shuddered, glyphs bleeding crimson. Zev's HUD flickered. External sensors detected movement. Dozens of heat signatures closing in. We've got company. Nara didn't look up. The vault's defenses. It doesn't want witnesses. You could have mentioned that earlier. Would you have listened? He grabbed her arm, yanking her toward the exit. Move. Outside, the storm had intensified. Methane sleet hissed against their suits as crystalline drones emerged from the ice. Spindly, insectile machines with blade-tipped appendages. Zev fired, his plasma rounds punching through a drone's thorax. It exploded in a shower of shrapnel. Back to the rover. Nara sprinted ahead, her movements fluid, tactical. She vaulted over a frozen ridge, sliding into the rover's passenger seat as Zev dove into the driver's side. The engine roared, treads churning sludge. Drones scuttled after them, their legs piercing the ice like spears. They're hurting us, Nara said, calibrating the rover's rear turret. Toward the methane geysers, Zev wrenched the wheel, skidding around a fissure. Got a better plan? Yes. She shouldered past him, seizing the controls. Drive faster. The turret whined, unleashing a barrage that carved through 3 drones. Shrapnel pinged off the rover's hull. Zev grimaced. She fought like a soldier, all precision and ice. No wasted motion, no fear. A geyser erupted ahead, spewing liquid methane. Zev swerved, the rover's flank scraping against a glacial wall. Nara's hand braced against the dashboard, her breathing steady. They're adaptive, learning our patterns, so we don't repeat them. He killed the headlights, plunging them into darkness. Hold on. The rover lurched off course, veering into a narrow crevasse. Drones followed, their joints screeching against the ice. Zev accelerated, heart hammering. The crevasse narrowed, the hull groaned. You'll crush us, Nara warned. Trust me. I don't. The walls closed in, ice scraped metal. A drone's blade pierced the rear hatch, inches from Nara's head. She didn't flinch. Zev slammed the brakes. The drones collided, their momentum crushing them against the rover's hull. Silence fell, broken only by the creak of settling ice. Nara exhaled. Reckless, effective. He reactivated the headlights, revealing the drone's shattered remains. You're welcome. She studied him, as though reassessing a flawed equation. We need to warn Earth, and start a panic. They'll nuke the signal, shoot the messengers, and call it containment. So we silence it ourselves. She pulled up a hologram, a derelict relay station, 200 clicks north. If we encrypt the warning, limit it to military channels, you'll start a war, better than extinction. He laughed bitterly. You really think your bosses will listen? They'll bury this, just like they buried me. Nara's gaze hardened. Then we make them here. Night fell, Titan's sky deepening into a bruised purple void. The rover crawled north, its headlights carving through the gloom. Zev monitored the sensors, his mind circling the same jagged thoughts. He'd spent years running from the man he'd been, the man who'd fled a burning ship, left his crew to die. Now this vault, this woman, had yanked him back into the light. Nara slept fitfully in the passenger seat, her brow furrowed. A strand of hair clung to her cheek, softened by the console's glow. He wondered what ghosts haunted her. Duty, maybe. The weight of legacy. She'd mentioned a family name once, pride and resentment braided into a single word. The vault's star map flickered in his mind. Earth, glowing like a jewel in a spider's web. How many civilizations had the Vorath consumed? How many Zevs had tried to outrun the end? He glanced at Nara. She'd die for her principles. He'd always considered that a weakness. Now watching her sleep, a soldier coiled even in rest, he envied her certainty. The rover's alarm blared. Ahead, the storm parted, revealing a jagged silhouette. The relay station, its dish tilted like a fallen crown. Zev gripped the wheel. This was the edge, the precipice. Jump, and he'd drown in the past. Stay, and the future burned. Nara stirred, her eyes opening. She said nothing, but her silence was a question. He accelerated. Chapter 2. The relay station loomed like a fossilized beast, its skeletal dish half buried in a dune of methane ice. Zev cut the rover's engine, letting the silence swallow them. Nara's breath fogged her visor as she studied the structure, its corroded hull webbed with crystalline growths. Vorath infection. The storm had stalled, the sky a stagnant bruise. Even the diamond dust seemed to hold its breath. He hated the stillness. Silence was a liar. It hid the skitter of drones in the ice, the groan of tectonic plates, the thud of his own pulse. He'd learned that lesson on Phobos, in the seconds before the hull breached. Silence was the prelude to screams. Nara shouldered her pack, her movements economical. No hesitation, no wasted energy. She'd barely spoken since the vault, her mind coiled around the problem like a serpent. Zev envied that focus. His own thoughts were a swarm, stinging and directionless. They crossed the ice field in single file, their boots crunching brittle frost. The relay's entrance yawned open, hinges rusted to dust. Inside, the walls glistened with Vorath bioluminescence, veins of blue phosphorescence, pulsing in time with the vault's hum. Nara traced a vein with her glove. It's rewiring the systems, turning the relay into a transmitter. Can you purge it? Not without destroying the station. She activated her wrist light, the beam slicing through the gloom. We need to access the core, isolate the encryption protocols before the Vorath code corrupts them. Zev followed, his rifle sweeping the shadows. The air stank of ozone and decay. He'd seen this before, derelicts eaten alive by alien tech, crews reduced to husks. But this was worse. The Vorath didn't just kill, they assimilated. The core chamber was a cathedral of ruin. Control panels bloomed with crystalline tumors, their screens fractured by jagged glyphs. Nara knelt, her tools scattering across the floor, the encryption still intact. Barely. If I can reroute through the secondary array. A tremor shook the station. Ice rained from the ceiling. Zev steadied himself against a console, his HUD flashing proximity alerts. They're here. Nara didn't look up. Buy me time, he cursed, retreating to the entrance. Outside, the ice quivered. Drones erupted from the dunes, larger now, their carapaces studded with stolen tech. Zev's plasma rounds sparked against their shields. Useless. They'd adapted. He switched to the rifle's underbarrel launcher, firing a magnesium flare. The drones recoiled, their sensors blinded. He fell back, sealing the chamber door. How long? Minutes. Nara's hands danced across the console, her interface flickering. The Vorath are tunneling beneath us. They'll collapse the station. Another tremor. A crack split the floor, spewing methane vapor. Zev gripped a railing, his gloves slick. You said minutes. Plural. I lied. The core flared, glyphs spiraling across the screens. Nara hissed, yanking her hand from a console as tendrils of light snaked toward her. It's sentient, defensive. Zev hauled her back. Can you stop it? Not here. She shoved a data chip into his palm. The encryption key. We need to reach the dish. Transmit manually. He stared at the chip, a sliver of hope, colder than Titan's heart. You're asking me to climb a death trap. Yes, and you. She unslung her rifle. I'll hold them off. He almost laughed. The idealist, playing hero. But her gaze held no martyr's fire, only calculus. She was the better shot, the logical choice, and logic, he realized, could be its own kind of cruelty. He left her there, framed in the core's hellish glow. The dish towered above him, its surface slick with hoarfrost. Zev climbed, his gloves slipping on the rungs. The storm had returned, diamond shards slicing his visor. Below the drones converged, their blades carving through the station's hull. He didn't look back. The access panel was frozen shut. He jammed his pry bar into the seam, tendons screaming. The chip slipped into the terminal, its ports clogged with ice. Come on, you relic. A explosion rocked the dish. He clung to the railing, the world tilting. Through the haze he spotted Nara, backpedaling across the ice, her rifle spitting fire. A drone lunged. She sidestepped, planting a charge on its thorax. The blast shredded two others. Clever, ruthless. The terminal beeped, the dish groaning as it pivoted skyward. Zev input the coordinates, his fingers numb. Earth's defense channels scrolled across the screen. He hesitated. One transmission, and the ECA would weaponize the warning. Start a war against phantoms. Nara's voice crackled in his comm. Status, ready. He hovered over the key. You sure about this? A pause. Static. Then no. He pressed it. The dish hummed, a beam of white light piercing the clouds. The drones froze, their sensors tracking the signal. Then they scattered, retreating into the ice. Zev sagged against the terminal. Below, Nara stood amidst the wreckage, her shoulders heaving. She'd live. For now. They regrouped in the rover, the heater struggling against Titan's chill. Nara tended to a gash on her forearm, her gloves stained with coolant blood. Zev watched her, the way she bit her lip against the pain. No complaints, no weakness. He tossed her a suture kit. You're lucky they didn't take the arm. Luck had nothing to do with it. She stitched the wound, her hands steady. You hesitated, wouldn't you? No, but her eyes flickered. Doubt perhaps, or guilt. He powered up the rover, the engines growled, drowning his thoughts. They drove north toward nothing, toward everything. The signal was sent, the Vorath diverted, but the ice whispered of darker things, of ancient hungers, of galaxies gnawed to bones. Night fell, eternal and suffocating. Nara slept, her head lolling against the window. Zev studied her reflection in the glass. She'd seemed indestructible in the vault, a force of pure will. Now, in sleep, she looked younger, frailer. He draped his jacket over her, the fabric still stinking of plasma burns. A pointless gesture. She'd mock him for it, but the tightness in his chest eased, just a fraction. Methane Sea was a black mirror, its surface unbroken. Zev steered the rover onto a frozen inlet, the ice groaning beneath them. Nara stirred, her gaze sharpening. We're off course. Relays dead. Need to scavenge parts. He avoided her eyes. There's a supply depot nearby. Pre-EECA. Abandoned. Depends on your definition. The depot was a gutted husk, its walls scarred by scavengers. Zev pried open a storage locker, tossing her a power cell. Check the east wing. Look for anything with a frequency modulator. She hesitated. You're lying. He froze. There's no depot. Her voice was soft, lethal. You're circling back, toward the vault. He turned, his jaw tight. The Vorath are hunting us now. That signal, it wasn't just a warning, it was a beacon. Our biosignatures are tagged. Her fist connected with his jaw. He staggered, tasting copper. You used the encryption to track us. She hissed. I bought us time. He spat blood. The Vorath want a meal. Let them chase us. Every second they're on our scent is a second Earth has to prepare. She lunged, pinning him against the wall. You don't get to decide that for me. He didn't resist. You'd have done the same. Her grip faltered. She stepped back, rage dissolving into something colder. How long? A day, maybe two. She turned away, her breath fogging the air. Then we make it count. The ice caves were a cathedral of teeth. Stalactites dripped with methane, their reflections fracturing in the rover's headlights. Nara navigated, her voice flat as she recited coordinates. Zev drove, his knuckles white on the wheel. The truce was fragile, a sheet of glass over a chasm. They'd need to double back, lay traps, lure the Vorath into the caves. A suicide run. But Nara had agreed, her silence more damning than any protest. He parked at a fissure's edge, the abyss below swallowing the light. Nara prepped the charges, her fingers deft. Zev watched her, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. A human gesture, fragile. "You ever think about quitting?" he asked. She didn't look up. "No, liar." Her hands stilled. "Every day." He crouched beside her, their shoulders brushing. "Why don't you?" She met his gaze. "Same reason you don't run now." The charges beeped. Armed, she stood retreating into the cold. Zev stared after her, the truth settling in his bones. They were mirrors reflecting each other's cracks. The Vorath came at dawn, a swarm blackening the horizon. Zev detonated the first charge, the cave mouth collapsing. Nara fired from the ridge, her rounds precise. Drones fell, their carcasses piling into barriers. But they adapted, always adapting. A drone breached the line, its blade slicing Zev's thigh. He fell, plasma rifle skittering away. Nara leapt down, her boot crushing the drone's sensor. She hauled him up, her arm around his waist. "Move." They limped to the rover, the drones a tidal wave at their heels. Nara took the wheel, her foot flooring the accelerator. Zev clung to the dash, blood seeping through his suit. The traps, gone. Her voice was raw. "We need a new plan." He laughed dizzy. "Got any miracles left?" She glanced at him. "One." The rover surged forward, aimed at the fissure's edge. Zev's gut lurched. "Nara, trust me." He closed his eyes. The rover plunged into the abyss. Chapter 3. The rover screamed as it fell, its hull shrieking against the fissure's jagged walls. Zev's stomach lurched into his throat, the world reduced to a blur of ice and shadow. Nara's hands were locked on the wheel, her jaw set, eyes reflecting the chaos outside. For a heartbeat he wondered if this was how it ended, not with a Vorath blade, but with the crushing embrace of Titan's frozen guts. Then the rover struck a slope, the impact rattled his teeth, the vehicle skidding down a glacial slide, sparks spraying like dying stars. Ice fragments clawed at the viewport, but the darkness began to thin. A faint bioluminescent glow seeped through the cracks in the ancient ice, painting the cavern walls in hues of sickly green. The rover ground to a halt, half buried in a drift of diamond dust. Nara slumped forward, her breath ragged, alive. Zev pried his fingers from the dashboard, his gloves slick with coolant blood. The air stank of burnt wiring and fear. Outside, the cavern stretched into a vast hollow throat, its ceiling studded with Vorath crystals that pulsed like malignant hearts. The drones would follow. They always followed. "You're insane," he croaked. She turned, a ghost of a smirk on her lips. "You're alive." He wanted to hate her, wanted to claw back the numbness that had kept him breathing all these years. But her eyes held no triumph, only exhaustion, the weight of worlds. He looked away. The cavern was a graveyard. Skeletons of long-dead machines littered the floor, their rusted carcasses cocooned in Vorath biomass. Nara moved through the wreckage like a shadow, her wrist light cutting through the gloom. Zev limped behind, his leg a firestorm. Every step screamed, every breath tasted of iron. "This isn't natural," she murmured, crouching beside a fossilized rover. Its hull was veined with crystalline growths, the driver's seat cradling a skeletal figure fused to the console. The Vorath, they're terraforming, rewriting the moon's biology. Zev leaned against a stalagmite, his visor fogging. "You sound impressed." "I'm terrified." She stood abruptly, her light catching on a structure ahead, a spire of black glass, its apex vanishing into the cavern's heights. "That's their relay, the heart of the network." The spire thrummed, a subsonic vibration that made his bones ache. Glyphs spiraled up its length, glowing the same venomous blue as the vault. Nara approached, her reflection fracturing in the glass. "It's amplifying the signal, coordinating the swarm." Zev eyed the skeletons. "And we're walking into its mouth. We're ending this." She unholstered her sidearm,
checking the charge. The encryption key I used. It's a two-stage trigger. The first pulse diverted the Vorath. The second can collapse the network. But it needs to be delivered here. She tapped the spire. He laughed. The sound hollow. You kept that to yourself. Would you have come? No. He'd have run, buried himself in the ice, and let the galaxy burn. But the old reflexes felt dull now, blunted by the woman who stood before him. A woman who'd rather die than compromise. A woman he'd begun to mirror. They'll swarm the moment we activate it, he said. I know. He limped to her side, his shoulder brushing hers. The spire's hum deepened, as though it recognized them. How long? Minutes. She hesitated. You should go. He stared at the skeletons. Not my style. Her gloved hand found his, brief and electric. Then we make it count. The Vorath came like a tide. Drones poured from the cavern's arteries, their blades carving grooves in the ice. Zev took position behind a wrecked crawler, his plasma rifle searing through the vanguard. Nara crouched atop the rover's carcass, her shots precise, each round punching through sensor clusters. They didn't speak, didn't need to. He'd forgotten what it felt like, fighting for something beyond survival. The clarity of purpose, the rhythm of breath and trigger. A drone lunged, its blade grazing his arm. He gutted it with a combat knife, its ichor sizzling on the ice. Nara's voice crackled over the cum. The trigger, it's ready. He turned. She stood at the spire's base, her palm pressed to a glyph. The structure blazed, light cascading upward. The drones froze, then shrieked, a dissonant choir, as the spire began to fracture. Nara, she didn't move. It needs a biometric lock. One of us has to stay. The ice beneath his feet trembled. No, the signal dies with the host. Her voice was calm, final. Go. He was running before the word faded, his legs screaming. He grabbed her arm, yanking her back. You don't get to martyr yourself. She fought him, teeth bared. Let me go. No. He shoved her toward the exit, his body shielding hers. You want to save Earth. Live. The spire exploded. The world turned white. Zev woke to silence. His visor was cracked, HUD dead. Nara lay beside him, her suit scorched but intact. The cavern ceiling had collapsed, sealing them in a tomb of ice and crystal. She stirred, her hand fumbling for his. Why? He didn't answer, couldn't. The truth was too vast, too fragile. They crawled through the wreckage, the air thinning. His oxygen gauge blinked red. Her steadier, always steadier, always steadier. At the surface, Titan's diamond sky greeted them, a tapestry of refracted starlight, indifferent and beautiful. The rover was gone. The Vorath, silent. Nara slumped against an ice boulder, her breath fogging the glass. The signal, gone. He sank beside her, their helmets nearly touching. The network's dead. She closed her eyes. They'll come for us. The ECA, maybe. And then, he watched the sky. Then we tell them the truth. She laughed, soft and broken. They'll lock you away. Worth it. Her hand brushed his. A question. He interlaced their fingers, the gloves polymer whispering. Above the storm had cleared, the stars sharp as knives. Epilogue. The rescue team found them 3 days later, half buried in a snowdrift. Zev's leg was frostbitten, Nara's arm infected. They were debriefed, separated, praised as heroes, condemned as traitors. But in the quiet between trials, they met, clandestine, in docking bays and observation decks. She taught him tactical codes. He taught her how to disappear. When the ECA launched its first deep space fleet, they stood on the Eventide's bridge, Titan a fading jewel in the viewport. Nara's shoulder pressed against his, her voice a murmur. They're still out there. The Vorath. He nodded. Let them come. The stars stretched endless before them, cold and bright. Together they watched,